So let's talk about the Netherlands. It's a real paradox, isn't it? On one hand, you've got one of the most successful economies in Europe, super wealthy. But on the other, you hear about all this strain on its public systems. How can a country be so successful and feel so stretched at the same time? Well, today we're going to try and break down this Dutch dilemma.
And you see this tension pretty much everywhere, right? The economy is booming, but the headlines are all about a housing crisis, jam-packed trains, public services just stretched to their absolute limit. It just doesn't quite add up. So to really get to the bottom of what's going on, we need to kind of isolate a key variable. Let's try a little thought experiment.
Okay, so let's imagine an alternate reality for a second. We're going to rewind the clock, say 20 years, and hit pause on one of the biggest forces shaping the country, population growth. What would that actually change?
Yeah, what if the Dutch population had just stayed completely flat for the last 20 years? No growth at all since the early 2000s. No increase, no decrease, just frozen. Can you imagine how different the country would look today?
All right, first things first, let's explore the upside of this scenario, because there definitely is one. In a world with zero population growth, what kind of problems that we see today might have, well, just vanished?
You know, this whole thought experiment really shows two completely different outcomes. It's like a coin with two very different sides. On one side, you've got these immediate, really obvious benefits of having less pressure from a growing population. But, and this is a big but, there's also a really serious downside. We'll get to that. But first, let's break down that unexpected upside.
So in the zero-growth world, just think about it. The housing market would probably be way less competitive. I mean, with fewer people fighting for the same number of homes, availability just naturally goes up. And it's a similar story with jobs, right? Less competition could mean less downward pressure on wages in some sectors. And this is a big one. Things like trains, roads, hospitals, they'd all be under a lot less strain. That means more resources available for every single person.
Just try to picture what that actually means for public services. If we call today's level of strain a 100, this zero-growth world could have kept it down at a much more manageable 75. That's a huge difference. It's massive. But, and here's the catch, all that relief would have come at a really steep hidden price. Because, while all those upsides sound pretty good, the economic fallout from total stagnation would have been, well, severe. We would have just been trading one set of problems for a completely different and maybe even worse set of crises.
Think about it. With no new people coming in, the workforce would just shrink and shrink as older generations retire. You'd suddenly have these crippling labor shortages in pretty much every sector you can think of, from healthcare to construction. And at the exact same time, the population gets older, and it gets older fast. This puts this incredible pressure on social systems, especially pensions. Why? Because you've got way fewer workers paying taxes to support a much bigger group of retirees.
You'd basically be staring down the barrel of a demographic time bomb. The whole country would be on a crash course for a future where almost half the population is retired or dependent on the other half. I mean, economically, a 1-to-1 ratio of workers to dependents, it's just completely unsustainable. It can't work.
And if you want a hard number on that, some models suggest the workforce could have shrunk by as much as 40% without migration. Just let that sink in for a second. 40%. A workforce that's almost half the size it is today. The economy just wouldn't function. It turns out that population growth wasn't just some nice-to-have thing. It was absolutely essential.
Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the whole issue. It's not really about whether growth is good or bad. The real problem is a fundamental mismatch in timing.
And here it is. This is the core of the Dutch dilemma. The costs of migration, you feel those right away. New people arrive, they need housing, they need healthcare, they need schools for their kids, and they need it now. That puts immediate, visible pressure on everything. But the economic benefits, well, those take time to build up. Over the long term, these newcomers become the workers, the taxpayers, the innovators, the consumers. They become the fuel for the economic engine that supports everyone. So the problem is simple, really. The pain is felt today, but the biggest gains are realized tomorrow.
And it's also really important to add a bit of nuance here. The word migrant isn't just one thing. It's not a monolith. For example, a skilled tech worker who moves here from abroad, they're probably contributing to the tax base almost from day one. On the other hand, a refugee who's fleeing a war might need a lot of support up front, and it could take them longer to find their footing in the job market. Both are part of the same big story, but their economic journeys and the timelines are just completely different.
So, all of this brings us to a really crucial realization. Maybe, just maybe, this entire debate has been framed around the completely wrong question all along.
You know how it is? The debate often gets stuck in this simple for or against argument. But the reality is much more complicated. The Netherlands, just like a lot of other successful economies, actually needs population growth to keep functioning. So the real question isn't about stopping growth, it's about managing it. Were the country's systems, housing, healthcare, infrastructure, were they actually built to handle the very growth that was fueling the economy? And that mismatch, that gap between the economic need for people and the public capacity to absorb them, that's the true source of the Dutch dilemma.